And we're live. What's up, dude?
What's going on, buddy boy?
Well, I forgot your birthday again this year. So,
Listen, it's been how many years now that you forgot it?
how many years have we been friends?
Since 2009, at least.
Mm, was it? Is that 2009? No,
2010, at least.
2010.
Yeah.
2010, because 2000, we graduated middle school 2009, I think, right?
Yes.
And then I met you summer going into sophomore year.
Yes.
Or
I
so,
think
yeah,
so.
and then the next year I switched to Frisch.
And then I left after that 1 year. You just made it so terrible for me.
Yes, actually, I did want to talk to you about that at a certain point.
For sure.
But yeah, so I maybe you know what it could be, by the way, and I could be wrong, but it could be my association with you is of quote unquote second half of camp, and
Mm.
I feel like that's end of summer, which would be August, and so I think that I think my association with you is that your birthday is at the end of the summer, which is August, and and July just feels smack in the middle, and I know that I miss it every single year, but
No, you want to know something funnier? Is that it's true because every time, let's say you, me, Yoni, your brother, talk about it, it's like I remember I don't remember your sister's birthdays for the life of me. I think Sephora's October,
November,
and I have
Yeah,
some,
November.
yeah, but I know Yoni's, I know yours, I know your mom's, I know your dad's, but it's funny because every time we talk about birthdays, and it's usually around Yoni's birthday, because it's the start of the summer, you
Yeah,
always say August 24th,
and your birthday is July 22nd,
21st.
21st.
Even now.
I don't know
Listen, it's,
why. I don't know what the block is. I
I
don't know
don't
what the
know,
mental
dude.
block is. It's weird.
Listen, it's funny because I remember we just had a conversation about the three dates you need to remember. And you didn't
Yeah.
remember two of them.
Well, that's not true. I remember there was no, there was two dates I had to remember. And it
Go
was my
ahead.
wife's birthday and she was birthday.
Right.
And and I didn't know. And you said and you said I think March 27th, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" He's like, "That's the day your
Exactly.
firstborn, the day your firstborn son was born." Um,
Listen,
which
it happens.
I
Dates
guess
are
so.
sort of arbitrary. I feel as we're getting older, like my birthday is something that I feel connected to, but on a level that it's just now a day where we go around the sun. As opposed to what it used to be, it's like, oh, celebrate and like let's go out and do something. And now it's just
What?
like,
You
oh,
don't celebrate your birthday?
no, I do, and the people around me do, but it's more the mentality around it has changed.
Okay. So you feel like you make it less of a big deal than what you thought than what you used to.
Yeah, like it's something that
It's
I
because you
think
don't want to
does.
age, dude.
I don't want to age. I don't feel 29. 29 is a weird number.
29's a very weird number, dude.
It's a weird
What's
number.
weird about it to you?
The oncoming of 30s, which means that you're closer to 40, and I've had no, it's very interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with people who have hit 40, 41, 42, 45, 46. And they all sort of say the same thing. Like, no matter how healthy, no matter how fit, no matter how mentally quote unquote stable, there is something that happens at 40, call it biological, call it evolutionary. Something happens at 40. And I think that's what 29 is sort of scary because you went through these 10 years of your 20s and you're like I'll get to it. I have a lot of friends who are much older than me. By much older, I mean 2 to 7 years older,
Hmm.
and they hit 30 before me, and I'll be like, I'll get there when I get there. And obviously, as time moves forward, not backwards, the reality is that I'm literally 359 days away from 30. You know what I
Yeah, it's
mean?
crazy. That's crazy,
It's
dude.
And it's a scary thing because like listen, when I was sitting in my bed, when I was lying in my bed as a 10-year-old, I was like, 20 years old, that's so far away. Concepts of time are just also so weird
Dude,
because
you never ever, I bet, have you ever thought that you were going to reach, you never thought, like, I always, when I was growing up, I never ever considered what my life at above the age of 21 would ever be. Like, I didn't think, like, what's my life going to be like as a 40-year-old, you know? Like,
yeah,
it just never, I never dreamt that I would get this far in life, you know? Like, not that I wouldn't still be alive, but just like, I never thought this age would ever happen to me, you know? Like, I'd be young forever.
I'm totally with you. Like for me, it was very much on the line of like I didn't understand what that meant. Like I didn't understand like there was anything more than what we're doing now. Like when we were in Muncie, when we were in Disney, when we were in all these things, like when doing all these things, I was always just like, yeah, this is the apex, this is the moment, this is the thing. And now it's just like there's so
Yeah, it's
much
so
more.
crazy.
Like I'll give you a really good example. Like until I moved to Israel, I didn't understand the concept of Israel. You know, like, and I'll explain what that means. It's like it's very interesting. Like the way we're taught in school back in Jersey at the Jewish high schools that we went to. It's like Israel is sort of this, it has problems, but it's idealistic. And then you get here and you realize the bureaucracy is crazy. You realize the people are crazy. You realize life is crazy, but it's such a different thing where it's like, yes, it has some of the attributes that we're taught, but it's sort of just like you never imagine it to be like what it is or what you saw it to be.
Well, I think that so I think that most things are like that if you are willing to give it the attention and the detail appreciation that it deserves,
Right.
right? Because I think that you could live your people could live like two people could live in the same place and live very different lives based on their level of involvement or intentionality or awareness in the life
I
that
want
they're
to go
living,
exactly on
you
that point
know,
when you
and
finish.
go for it, dude. That's all I gotta say.
I was listening to a podcast, and I forget the psychologist or doctor, and I think he's a psychiatrist actually. And he said something very little tangent, but very very similar to what you just said. And I find it interesting because we both come from very big families. And the host of the podcast said, "Me, I don't understand how my sister and I are two different people." And all these things, and we've experienced the same life and growing up. And the psychiatrist stopped him right there and said, you're absolutely incorrect about everything. Not only are you two different genders, you're also two different ages. Your parents were already parents when they had you because they had an older sister. So I think you're 100% correct.
Right.
Like you can be in the same spot, the same place, literally do the same exact thing and come out with a different perspective on everything. And I think that's what's really also special sometimes about moving to a new place. It doesn't have to be Israel. I think your perspective of moving to Seattle when you did was completely different from Ari Mendelow's. And I think that's the
Hmm.
cool thing. And that's like, I want to say that's like a Yuval Harari type of like anecdote. And Yuval Harari wrote the book Homo Sapiens, which is also a very interesting book.
Did he die recently, or am I
No, you're
making that
making
up?
it up. Yeah,
Really? I read
Yuval
something about it
Harari is
recently, but
about, I think he's about 55 years
he's in
old.
his 60s.
Maybe.
No, he's not. Let's look it up.
Go
Yeah,
for
go
it.
ahead. I'm looking it up.
You need a Jamie like Joe Rogan has.
Yeah, yeah, right.
But
Okay, so
but I
yeah. So what did he say?
so so sort of on the lines of like evolution, like no matter what, like let's say we jump back like 30,000 years, 40,000 years. What
He's
he's
48, by the
48.
way. We're both
Nah,
wrong.
okay. He makes very interesting points about like the origin of life and primalism and all these things in perspective, and he ties it also into sort of like Einstein's theory of relativity, like that time and space move based on your relative position of where you are. And it's super interesting, like what he speaks about and how he integrates it with like life, and like just to connect it to like what we started with like age. Like we're all gonna hit, God willing, we're all going to hit the same age. Like your birthday's in December, my birthday's in July, Jason's birthday's in October, Zach's birthday is in April. You know what I mean? Like we all hit it at different stages, but our perspectives are so different, even though we come from similar places, similar backgrounds. And it's super interesting. And that's why also like
Sure,
I love
sure.
listening to podcasts that are like I think I told you about this one, a podcast that's like answering the questions to the universe in 15 minutes because it really forces you to think in perspective, and it's like things about death and afterlife and God. And I just love hearing perspectives. And I think really like where I am now in life, and like I've really become a student of life rather than, I know it sounds very hotsy totsy in the,
No, by the way, no, it's not. It's not. It's not. But I think that it's a sign of maturity because I think that there's a lot of. I think that as when people look, people are trained to look at school or learning like some kind of cookie cutter. You have to fit a certain bill or you know think a certain way that your teacher's thinking. But life is just figuring out how everything relates to one
right,
another, and so when you kind of leave that school system behind for long enough, a lot of people like to learn 5, 10, 20 years out of school, and they find that they're interested in topics way more diverse than what they were ever interested at school because that was based, generally speaking, either on like a natural inclination or a good teacher if
right.
they were lucky, but like I'm more interested in science now than I've ever been,
I
and
was gonna say
you know exactly how bad I was at science and how little I was interested in it. Do you remember when I in physics in junior year when I when I thought that you knew everything, I cheated on you. We both got like 30s on the test,
physics was
and the
never
teacher was
my
like,
strong point.
and the teacher called us over, and she was like, "Ephraim," and I'm like, "Yeah." She's like. He's like you chose the wrong person to cheat on. You guys both got like a 30
Yeah,
or like a 35 or something like that. And I was like, oh man, so I got caught without any of the benefits. But
yeah. I think it's funny.
let's
I
yeah.
think it's funny that happened. And now where I am as a PhD in Hebrew, but
Yeah.
um, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with the way you say it because I don't like being I'll call it, for lack of a better term, a professional scientist, and like really seeing the different ways people learn. I think that it's sort of like the way you said. I agree with you with what you say, but I want to say it a little bit different. It's not
Okay.
for not liking science. Like luckily I had wonderful science teachers. Like the reason I'm in science is because I had a teacher in 7th grade who literally saw I was struggling with how like electricity works and like currents and everything. And I literally said to her, I studied my brains out for 3 weeks. I couldn't get it. There was two versions of the
Right.
test, and she would give obviously the students who were excelling a harder test, and the students that she knew were struggling, and she gave me the easier test, and I ended up doing relatively well. And like that's what really started me in science. So yes, it's 100%.
That's really cool that the teacher did
Yeah,
that.
unfortunately, she passed. I went to her funeral. She passed away, I think 2 3 years ago, and it was really sad. And
Wow.
unfortunate, and I was a little upset about my middle school, what they said about her. And she said she was, and they said correct things, but they neglected to mention the amount of generations of doctors and scientists and just engineers that came out of her classroom. They're like, oh, her midot, her being a teacher, she's a great teacher. But I think it's more than that. And like you and I sometimes have the conversation about like the afterlife. And like whatever people believe, like it's legacy, right? It's things that are legacy. And like I think that what really annoyed me about what they wrote in their newsletter is that it wasn't enough. Like her legacy is
Right.
in people. I know three people that are scientists in PhD levels that were in my class in 7th grade. I know one of them that's a doctor, one of them that's an engineer. Like that credit is due to the base level education that we got in 7th grade when we really started learning the basics of physics, chemistry, biology, math. It's really something that like I was very upset about. But all in all, it was
I agree. By the way, just in terms of just the legacy thing, just as a sidebar, I think that I think that we get a little egocentric when it comes to legacy, and like we want to be remembered as the person that did that. But as I've gotten a little older, I'm 28, I'm younger than you are, but
6 months.
I'm a little bit less focused on getting the credit for my legacy rather than actually having the impact.
Mm,
You know, so like if I if I changed, let's say like let's say this teacher, right? Like she made this impact, and there are more doctors and there are more scientists and there's more engineers out there because of her. Um, I wouldn't care whether someone remembered that it was a Prime Hirschman that did that or not. What I would care is just the fact that more people are doing better things because of me.
for sure.
Just in general, that the world is now a better place because of the life that I lived. And so I don't necessarily, so yeah, we're forgotten in 50 years after we're dead. Very, very few people on this planet are going to remember the names, of Chaim Hirschman or Charles Krul or Rami Krul. Like very few people. Maybe our grandkids, and then our great grandkids definitely don't. I don't know my great. Yeah, I mean, I know. I think two or three of my great grandparents' names,
Right.
um, but I don't know them. But I do. But I am connected. I do real. I think quite a bit about what was required to create the space for me and my family to exist,
Right.
for my grandparents to come from Yemen, and my Saba to come from Poland, and my grandmother to come from the forest in the Holocaust, and what their family, who I don't even know, I don't know, I don't know I don't think I know my great grandmother's name. I know the only reason I know my great grandfather's name is because I'm named after
Right.
him. But but I know what they did to survive the Nazis, to create the space to let their grandkids sit at at 11:20 in the morning recording a podcast with a coffee and an arak, and and talk about life. But that's that,
But you're
and
missing a vital
um
point with this
okay.
technology that we have, and if it only continues, God willing, with people like Elon Musk and people in general, people are going to be able, because that's the personalization. Like I remember last time we spoke,
Yeah, but that's not the
it's not
goal.
the
The goal is
goal,
not to be remembered
but it's not
forever. The goal is to
for
live
sure,
and to have an
for
impact.
sure. But what I'm saying is that we have the rare ability that even when we pass, that we're not going to be just names or named after someone. People are going to be able to see it because, we have all this recorded history personally.
Right,
We have
right.
all our
True.
everything's like, listen,
Yeah.
unless something tragically happens and we're back to the Stone Age, like, I would hope in 150 years that our descendants will see, oh, like Avrumi and Ephraim were friends and they did this podcast. We can hear their voice. Like the really cool thing is that
Yeah.
my grandparents on my dad's side went through the Holocaust. Unfortunately, my grandfather didn't go to Spielberg's recording sessions or whatever it was, but my grandmother did. And I
Mm-hmm.
that is the last quote unquote living memory. By living, I mean it's living, it's breathing, it's her voice of hearing her and telling
Yeah.
her story. Other than that, yeah, we have pictures, but like this is something that like I will show my kids on Yom HaShoah and on Holocaust Memorial Day.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're
So
right.
we live
Yeah.
in
It's true. We live in
in
a
an interesting
yeah,
time.
definitely. For sure. And actually that's part of the reason why I write. Um is because when I write, I could be a lot more honest and a lot more blunt than I care to be in
Right,
conversations. Mostly it's because it's about admitting things that I don't know that I don't want to say out
for
loud,
sure.
right? But a couple of years ago, I think I'm sure I told you this, but a couple of years ago, um, we were hanging out at the house, and I rarely think God gets sick. I almost never get sick. And I got a fever for the first time in forever. But before we say this, hold on, I just want to say full circle before we go back that happy
Thank
birthday
you.
and happy belated birthday. Cheers,
Cheers,
L'chaim.
l'chaim.
And sorry that I forgot again,
We'll wait
but
till
I
next year
hope
for
you
you to forget
enjoy this
again.
brandy.
We'll enjoy the brandy. We'll
That's right.
enjoy
That's right,
everything.
L'chaim.
L'chaim to you.
So so I got a fever for the first time in probably a decade, if not more. I haven't had a fever in forever, right? And I never had. I don't remember this experience. Like it was such a bizarre experience. I was freezing cold, and then I was sweating, and then when I was cold, nothing would heat me up. I was under blankets and a sweatshirt, and I'm taking a hot shower, and I'm just miserable, and I'm standing in the shower, and extremely dramatic, you know, and, and I'm like, this is it. I'm gonna die. I'm like, I wasn't married yet. I wasn't,
They're like, "Mama, take me now."
I wasn't a dad. I'm like, this is it. I'm done. I'm gonna die. And I'm standing in the shower and I'm thinking to myself, dramatically in the shower, I'm like, if I died, tonight, how happy am I with the life that I lived until now? That was really what I thought. Like I thought I was gonna die, and I really thought, which is such a silly thing now
Right,
looking back, but and then I was like, but how happy am I with the life that I lived? And do I feel and one of the things that did comfort me was the fact that I have my writing, that my poems and my letters to myself and my, whatever that I've written since, or, just whatever ideas or notes that I've written since
right.
2015, since I started college. And I was like, my family, if I die tomorrow, my family can look at my computer and really get an idea as to like who I was and get an idea, and my siblings could see that like if they're having a hard time dating or they're having a hard time finding themselves in this world, like they're not the only ones going through it, and not everyone has everything worked
Right.
out, and maybe they could use some of the techniques that I used to try to figure out whether it works for them or not, and like that gave me in my darkest hour of my one fever in the shower, it gave me it really, I felt good. I felt like I felt at peace. It was really interesting. But yeah, and then and it's only become more important to continue writing as I move forward in life with family and with with kids and with a wife and with siblings and everything and
Right.
friends. That one day when I'm not here, like they could, when she was growing up, my grandkids are growing up, and they're going through these are the things that we go through. As much as technology changes, these are people, these are
It's a
human
human
things,
condition.
like the human conditions are loneliness and feelings of inadequacy, or feelings of highs and lows, and everything in between, and what am I going to do with myself, and wanting to be fulfilled, and like this, like no matter how much technology changes, I think that it's such a primal human instinct. These are such
100%.
primal human, feelings or emotions that I think that even in 100 years, or 200 years, or 500 years, it'll be relevant and it'll be important. And that's why we have these guidebooks, and that's why we have these families and these traditions
For
and
sure.
legacies. Legacies shouldn't be about maintaining this business that I have and putting my name up on as many schools or
Synagogues,
or
yeah.
institutions as possible. Yeah, your legacy is about helping the future generations make their way through the world, and I think that that's the most
I
important thing.
completely agree with that. I think that it's a beautiful idea as well. Like I think that to go back to the human condition thing, like it's very cool to see memoirs, even like of let's say Churchill or a random soldier at the front line and see like I'm still not married, like ma and pa are gonna be mad when I come home if I don't find myself a wife, like all these things, like 100%, like this human condition is what has been built, quote unquote, in modern history of like finding these things. I mean, Fiddler on the Roof is sort of like it's comical to bring it up, but it's sort of like it's still the thing. Like we live in these communities that are like, ah, tradition, get married, the children, the mother-in-law, and
Yeah.
all of these things. And it's just yeah, it's the human condition, and we go through it. And I think through your writing, and you do it very well and prolifically, I think it really is going to be something that, like, at the end of the day, like maybe, it's one of those, like, at your 50th birthday, like, Shua's going to make you a book of all your writings type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my sister did that for me at one point, and then I self-published a couple of books of poetry that I wrote.
Right.
But um, yeah, I mean, it would be more important to me that Shua read it rather than publish it and give
Oh,
it to
for
me.
sure.
That he would like relate to it or he would use it.
Does that
Um,
excite you about to jump
I
to that? Like, does that excite you to see? I mean, even now that he's a 1 year old, 1.5 year old, like, does it excite you to be like, oh, in 2 years he's going to be like first experiences? Like to go off of that, like, are you going to be like, oh, this is like me and like how I saw it, and sort of bring that into his life as well and sort of push him the right way? Or how do you see it?
um, I
It's a
don't
heavy
know.
question.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm already, he's almost a year and a half now, and I'm already getting these notifications on my phone from 1 year ago
Right.
today, and thinking about how different he was before he could crawl, how different he was before he could, before he could articulate himself or express himself, or how different he was without his hair now.
Yeah.
Like he has this long curly hair, and it's not really curly, but curls on the bottom, and and how he looked like when he was bald. He looks like an alien,
Right.
and I'm like, oh wow, I remember those. I think most of the life. I think most of life, I'm already starting to see it is going to be. I remember that like it was yesterday,
Wow.
and like because time really is flying, is really zipping by, and the other thing that we did, which I think is cool, is we started I opened I made him an email address, and I'm sending him emails and updates and pictures and stuff that and then I'll give him the login when he turns like 18 or 20 or
I
whatever
love
it is,
that.
when he leaves home. And then he could look back and he could see that we wrote letters to him when he was 1, when he was 2, what we're trying to accomplish together,
Does Rachel also write?
pictures and videos. She does. We Neither of us have been doing it so often. We more send pictures and stuff like that. First time in Disney, first time, hanging out with his grandparents, hanging out with my parents and her parents, hanging out with my grandparents, which unfortunately, I mean, I don't know how much. Like, my grandmother died when I was 4 or 5,
Right.
and I really, really only have very, very vague, foggy memories.
Mm.
I have more. It's interesting. It's kind of like it's more associations than it is an actual memory. Like, I associate, let's say, the kitchen, the dining room table, right? So, I remember going there for a holiday. I remember like a food that she'd make. Like, she used to make this mason jar of salami and eggs,
Interesting.
and like I remember that about. I remember and I guess that goes hand in hand with how memory works, which is that it's associative. So, there's nothing to really associate me with her face or our interactions, I don't think, as much. But there are associations from being in my grandfather's house, as a, while I'm an
Right.
adult, that I can look at it and it'll spark something from when I was way younger.
Right.
That I don't even remember the full details, but I do. Like, there is somewhere in the back of my head this association. I wonder if I take enough shrooms or LSD, if I'll be able to
I didn't
access
think it
that.
was
I
going to
don't
lead
know,
to that, but
but
listen, you don't know until you try.
that's right. You don't know until you
Yeah.
try. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I try not to plan. I don't want to plan, my kids' futures out for them. I'll let them work it out, and the only thing that I want to do is just to help them, figure themselves out.
Right.
Like,
Guidance,
I think,
advice.
yeah, right. So, meaning, you take the steering wheel. I'll be in the passenger seat. Now, I might be a backseat driver to a certain
For
extent,
sure.
but you've still got the wheel, and you can still do what you want to do. And whether I'm having a heart attack or not in the driver's seat, sorry, in the passenger seat, isn't relevant nearly as much as the fact that you're steering your own life, and you could choose to listen to me or not.
All right.
Um,
It's funny you use that analogy because I had this conversation with my dad literally, I think it was either on my birthday or like right around it, asking him like what was the like oh my God moment for you as a parent where it's like oh we're growing up. And he said like surprisingly so the first thing he said is like when you started walking and you guys were mobile, like that was a little bit like oh they're a person. But he said the thing that scared him the most and what made him be like oh they're adults was driving. He said driving was one of not going to college, not like moving to Israel, not doing any of it. He was like driving scared the living hell out of me. Yeah,
really, because he was afraid. By the way, when you realize how dangerous driving is and how dangerous cars are, there are so many
so dangerous.
incompetent people on the road. It's crazy. And they also should implement. I don't understand what the problem is with implementing that past a certain age, you have to take a driver's test every year or two. Like, past the age of like 75. I think you should have to, like, listen, if you want to keep on driving, keep on driving. If you don't want to drive, great. It's very important that you recognize, that you don't want to put like a lot of people driving is a source of pride,
Right.
and they'll be like, no, I want to be able to get around. I need to be independent. I need to be able to go this place without having to rely on you. But you're gonna kill someone. It's not worth it,
So,
So what do you prove? So it's essentially pride,
right.
and so I think at a certain age, you have to say, okay, every year you take a driver's test, you show that you're capable of navigating through X, Y, and Z circumstance or traffic or whatever it is. And if you could do it, great, keep on driving. And if not, sorry, get a ride, get an Uber, do whatever you got to do,
So in
get a
Israel, they
bicycle.
do take away your license after a certain age, or if you fail to,
Do
yeah,
they?
I think it is once you hit pension age, which I think in Israel is 65, if I'm not mistaken.
No
Yeah,
way.
they said you have to take tests. I'm not 100% certain. I have to say
Oh, if you have to take tests,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
one
yeah.
thing. They
No,
can't
no,
take,
no. They
but
take it
they,
away if you fail the test.
okay,
That's
gotcha,
what I
gotcha.
mean. I
Yeah, that's
don't know
great.
what the age exactly is, but it probably should be around when you hit pension, where it's like, you're a little bit not, you're a little bit spry, but not spry enough to make that left turn, you know?
Dude, if you can choose to drive between the ages of 65 and 80 or get your pension, which would you choose?
I would get pension. I mean,
Yeah, you guys don't like
I
to
am a
drive.
control freak. I do like to drive. Like when it comes down to it, like I don't like being in the passenger seat. However, if you told me in my pension, I had enough money to get a personal driver, 100%. Like,
Okay, well,
I wouldn't mind.
over driving though, over actually over actually like being able
Well,
to drive.
here's the thing. Like, you're talking to someone who doesn't own a car in Israel. I'm going to own a car within the next month because I am going to buy one. But
Oh
I've
God.
survived without a car in Israel for the past seven
Yeah.
years. So luckily Israel and transportation, depending on how you want to look at it, like I live in Tel Aviv currently, I live on the train line. Like for me, it's very simple. But I understand for someone who lives in the kibbutzim or in the moshavim or places that are inaccessible by, or they have every hour a bus, which is a little bit of insanity, and sometimes the bus doesn't even come. Like they need a car. But
Yeah.
someone who lives in like Modi'in, Tel Aviv, even Rehovot, where I'm going to move to, like I don't really need a car. It's a luxury. But so saying something to me like, would you rather pension or that is it's not such a hard question for me to answer.
Yeah. 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 I think, but I'm talking about a principle more. Although Israel does happen to have, I think, some of the best public transportation of
For
anywhere I've
sure.
ever
Except on
seen or been.
Fridays.
Like it's incredible. Yeah, but even so, it's still as good or better than anything that
Experienced.
than any other, yeah, than anything I've experienced for
Because I
sure.
think they base it off
Um,
of a European style. Like London has very good public transportation. Like this, the city itself. To get outside of London, I haven't really done that. But when I was in London, it's very simple. So I think Israel really based their system, and they're building light rails everywhere. They're connecting cities much more easily. But again, in Israel, everything takes 20, 30, 40 years to build. So
no, it doesn't. How long did it take to build that light rail from the airport to Yerushalayim?
uh, 15 to 20 years, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it didn't.
100%.
What are you
Look it
talking
up.
about?
I will put money on it. Yep.
Really? What's the
When
train
I
called?
was in, it's not a
Train.
light rail. It's the train from Yerushalayim to Ben Gurion, and I remember when I came to Israel in 20. When my grandfather died in 2009, and they said that it was going to be finished. It was only finished when I moved to Israel in like roughly 2018, 2019. It took them
2008, but various objections, bureaucratic delays, and engineering difficulties caused the planning and construction to span over 2 decades, with the line opening for service in stages. Yeah, but it opened for service in stages
for
though.
sure, but
So I
that's
don't think
hello.
it didn't take 20
Let's use a
years.
Disney
Yeah, it
example.
started in 2001, dude. Dude, it started in 2001.
Let's use the Disney example. When you soft open something, is that considered to be open?
Yeah.
So fine. So
In my opinion,
If
it
you want to
is.
play that game, then fine. It didn't take 20 years. But if you want to talk about paying customers where people get on the train and everything like that, it was 2001 to roughly 2020.
Yeah, do you remember when it was free at one
It
point,
was
right? Remember
free
when
for
we
the
went?
first 6 months.
I remember that. That was crazy. What a crazy move.
Yeah.
What do you think incentivized them? You think what incentivized them to do
I
that?
actually have the answer to that, the real answer.
Okay.
Israelis as a culture are very stubborn. Full stop. Let's move
Mm-hmm.
on to the next sentence.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Because of that, as a cult,
By the way, I'm having more arak. You have more
I'm going
brandy?
to go pour myself another one. Yes. I need to grab ice as
Okay.
well. Because
Yeah.
of that, and they did the same thing with the Tel Aviv light rail, which they just finished as well, and it's a wonderful running machine. It is wonderful. I love it. It gets you from basically Ramat Gan to the beach in 15 minutes, which depending on traffic would take you anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour. And it
Really?
no traffic, no nothing, air conditioned. It's great. There's security. It's wonderful. So what was the incentive? Let's go back to that. The incentivized program that Israel does to make people take the light rail is because they're stubborn and Israelis like to do what they like to do. If you drive every day from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv, you're going to be like, why am I going to leave the comfort of my car to go on a smelly train with people? However, people started to realize once they went on it and they saw it was free for 6 months, they're like, oh my God, I can get to Tel Aviv in 37 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
really to
Yeah. It's
make
awesome.
people recognize it's like
And it's usually over an hour based on the type of transportation you're
for
taking, right?
sure.
Because you have to walk to the local bus, you have to walk to, you have to wait for the stops, and at the end of the day, generally, I mean, this probably cuts off 20 minutes, 20, 25 minutes of the
But that's
traveling time,
huge.
right?
Like imagine someone like me who likes to have a bathroom around all the time, where
Yeah.
now you have the ability to go to the bathroom and you have the ability to work on the train. Like if you're driving in or you're on a bus and you're stuck in traffic, it could take you anywhere between an hour to 4 hours to get to work. Sometimes they close the highway, sometimes there's a giant accident. It's the same thing that happens in New York, New Jersey, but the highways in Israel are smaller. So this was a really,
Yeah.
really, really good and big solution. And the reason why is that you have all these people now who don't take their cars into Tel Aviv, and where the train goes is right into the center to Azrieli, which is the one of the main hubs of Israel for work. It's considered to be the financial district, the diamond district, the
That's where all the corporate companies are,
exactly,
right? That's where like
yeah,
EY and Deloitte and
exactly.
all those places are, right? Microsoft, I think.
Microsoft is there
Um,
also, yes.
I could be, and isn't it? Isn't the Jerusalem station also a giant bomb
So
shelter?
it's a yes. The rumor of why you're asking it that way is it's rumored to also be a nuclear fallout shelter.
Really?
Yeah, so
It's really deep in the
it's
ground. I
deep.
mean, it's stories and stories below the ground,
Yeah,
right?
not only I think the whole trip, if you don't run up the escalators, because they have the most like the escalators are at like a 75-degree angle. Um, if you don't run
Yeah.
up the escalators, the trip down takes I think 7 minutes and 43 seconds or something like that on an escalator
So just 7 straight minutes, just 7 straight minutes
going down.
down into the
Yeah,
ground. That's
yeah,
crazy.
and
It's
and
so
when you go
crazy.
by it, and when you finish and you go down, they have these giant. I don't know if they're steel or titanium or whatever. They have these giant. I'll call them titanium for more oomph. Titanium doors that
Yeah.
they shut if there is a bomb scare or something like that, or rockets or something. So I don't know if it's true, and I am not interested enough to find out, but I don't know if it's true. But the rumor is
Okay.
that it's a nuclear fallout that can fit, I think, the registered population of Jerusalem.
That's
Yeah,
crazy. That's so crazy.
it's
I
a
mean,
weird one.
it's so it's so well. What's cool to me and interesting to me is that Israel plans everything um, based on worst case scenario, and always preparing for the worst thing to happen because it's in our genetics to have the worst things happen to Jews, and so we kind of learn from
Right.
that. But that, like, they think about how much extra work it probably required. Let's say it's not a nuclear facility, safety zone or whatever it is, right? Let's say it's just a giant. Let's say really it's just a giant bomb
Right.
shelter for in case you go to war with Iran,
God
or
forbid.
in case Jerusalem's ever really, God forbid, in case Jerusalem's really ever in danger, you know, you literally plan like they literally planned a a city-sized train station 7.5 minutes straight down into the ground with enormous metal doors to protect their people just in case. And like if you think like it seems so unnecessary, but it shows like the mentality, and it shows like almost like what's the word for it? It's like national
Yep.
trauma
Yep.
that
Yep.
like you have to defend yourself, and you have to protect yourself at all times against anything, and you have to defend as many people as you can. It's not a Mark Zuckerberg shelter in Hawaii for him and his family. It's like it fits an entire registered city of Jerusalem. It's crazy,
I think
but it's so cool.
it's cool in that sense. It's scary in another sense, but to get a little political, it just sort of shows the difference between the mentality of Judaism and the Jewish state, and that does include the Arab Muslims who live here, and the Druze and the Bedouins and the Christians and everyone.
Yeah,
But it doesn't, like,
Armenians.
Armenians, whoever lives here. It really shows the value that we put on life. And if you look at, I think it's sort of funny because when we attacked Yemen in response to them sending a UAV to Tel Aviv, they have no warning systems. They have no
Mhm.
anti plane, helicopter, anything, and they don't care about their people. The same thing with Hamas,
Well, Yemen's pretty decrepit, dude.
for
Yemen's
sure,
Yemen's Yemen's has fallen apart. I mean, over the last 60 years,
for
70 years or
sure. So I
more,
could give you a better example.
right? Like it's really,
If you want a better example,
yeah.
let's talk about Hamas. Hamas has billions upon billions upon billions of dollars that has been put into the Gaza Strip to allow them to build infrastructure. And listen, if they were made into a state tomorrow and we went to war with Gaza, the game's over. They have no bomb shelters, they have tunnels that they will not put their citizens
Right.
in to protect them, quote unquote citizens. They're not a state, they're a terror organization. But again, it just shows like it's traumatic for Israelis. But again, like we care about our people. Like it was on October 7th, it was very interesting. We were seeing lines and lines and lines and lines and lines of cars before people got their call to go back to the reserve. It's something called Sab Shmona, which has only happened, I think, three other times where there's a Sab Shmona. I think it happened in '67 in the Yom Kippur War, and
Tzad Shmona means eighth
it
side,
means it
eight
means
sides.
yeah. So it means like Tzav is like, I mean, Tzav is also a
Oh,
turtle,
Tzav.
but
Yeah. Okay.
but it boils down to like war. You're getting not drafted, but you're getting called to reserves on the case of all out war. Um,
Right.
and like the thing is that like everyone, and they didn't care what their officer said. Everyone went. So it's to go to the main point. Like Jerusalem is just like one point of where we value life. Like the second we all found out, like I have a friend that we went to camp with, Ezra, and I ran to bring his unit food, and I ran all over the place, and I went with your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And
That's
we
right.
brought his whole unit. It was like 5, 6, 7,000 shekels worth of food and snacks and drinks, and
It's like $20, by the way.
five
But yeah.
thousand shekels, whatever you want to call it. But it's it's
Okay.
it's it's sort of the thing. Again, it's like legacy, it's life, it's all of these things. Like everything that we've been talking about here is really connected to the essence of what Israel, at least that what I think, my perspective of Israel is. Whereas we value life, we value family, we value these things. We want people to enjoy their lives and continue living it the way they want. Like, I think one of the beautiful things that's like usually said is that like we would like, but it was by Golda Meir. It's like the second they put down their weapons, like there's peace. It's like it's this scary thing where it's like Israel has and always wants to put down their guns, and we can't. And it's a sad thing because we want to, and we lose a lot of people. Like my cousins were here yesterday because someone from their yishuv, from their community, was injured in Gaza, and they went to go visit him in Tel Aviv in one of the hospitals. So it's sort of like the whole to sort of close this story. It's sort of like, as you said, it's traumatic, but sort of a defiant, and I'm missing the word for it. It just explains the essence of it.
Explains the
Of
culture. It
yeah,
explains, yeah, explains the spirit and the soul of the
right,
people and the nation. It's true, and I don't know. I mean, there's very, very, very. I don't know many other countries that value the life of the. Sorry, that value not even life, but dead bodies
right,
of their people that they're willing to trade 20, 50, 100, 200, you
thousands,
know, well, thousands.
thousands.
No, for yeah,
Gilad Shalit
for
was
just
traded, I think.
no, but I'm talking about just I know, but I'm just talking about just a dead body.
Yeah,
I'm talking about someone's body that that the family could have and that they could bury
right,
and they could give the proper respect to. That they would trade dozens of terrorists that that
yeah,
were caught in action, and and you get and you let them go for the sake of a dead body, to give that body respect and love, and to return it to its family and say that this family deserves to mourn the way that it should, and this family deserves to be reunited and say goodbye to their father, son, daughter, mother,
right,
whatever it is. Um, it's really, and I know that, it's so interesting because it's a constant struggle between the practical and the pragmatic implications. Like, are you really going to let 150 people that have tried stabbing, killing, shooting, raping your civilians get back out there just because they have a body, and like it's not necessarily a pragmatic decision.
right,
Like life isn't rational. Life, especially decision making, especially when it comes to the thing like morale and humanity. That's morale and humanity seem to defy all kind of sense of reason and logic, and like nothing. I don't know if we could, and I don't know enough about it. When a sports player gets into the zone, nothing changes physically about them.
right,
They're not shooting. Their form doesn't change anymore. The way that they dribble doesn't change. But there's something in their head that clicks that impacts their ability, their capabilities, and for the morale of the people, it's not always just about a simple equation like 100 terrorists to a dead body. It's what is how does it impact the families? How does it impact the nation that I mean, and I know that you saw, that you see this all the time. My parents were talking to me about it when they got back from Israel after October 7th, when they were there for vacation. But they're like, there was a kid that died, 19-year-old soldier that died in Beit Shemesh, and cars and people were lined up the street, and no one knew who they
yeah,
were, and no one knew them, and everyone was crying for them, and everyone was hugging the family, and just, and there's nothing rational about it. I mean, there's nothing that makes sense about it. But when everyone is able to, when you're so connected, and you're so feeling, and you're so this is you feel like this is your blood that's pumping through your
for
veins,
sure.
then you don't necessarily have to make the rational decision to make the right
Right.
decision. You know,
I think that comes with like,
um,
yeah, living here for now, going on September 25th will be 8 years. Um,
right.
I think, which is crazy. Every time now, every year gets a little bit more interesting in the sense of like before, like living in like when I lived in America. in my first year, it was like when you heard a soldier died or there's rockets, it didn't really mean so much. And now, like
Yeah.
even dating an Israeli, a girl who's 100% Israeli, it's like who has family members that are still in the army that do miluim. There's such a different,
What's Miluim?
sorry, is reserves. Um,
Okay.
when they do reserve duty and service and they go back to their units and they really serve their country, it's just like you get sort of chills and you get scared and you get pride, but you get scared, and like the news is no longer just like, Channel 7 news. Oh, there was a robbery on 45th Street in New York. It's like, oh, soldier died, and
Yeah.
you're like, shit. Is this my neighbor? Is this my cousin? Is this my friend? I
Yeah.
have a story. I
Yeah.
don't think you met him. I have a friend, and I won't mention his name because he doesn't really like the story. He doesn't like being in the quote unquote a limelight. Um, but even to your so many listeners, but he got injured, like very, 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 very injured. He was on the Gaza envelope, or in Hebrew the Otef, and he heard the red alert, which is the sirens go off, and there was a drone, and it
Hmm.
dropped a bomb, a grenade, on his unit. And he was airlifted to the hospital, and luckily he lived and he's okay, and he literally has shrapnel in his leg. But that's why it's so scary, and there's so much connection. And as I, or as anyone who lives here more and more and more and more, you hear all these stories, and like Karen's my girlfriend's um, my girlfriend's brother-in-law at his son's bris, which is the Jewish circumcision. Um, yeah,
The
the moil,
Moyle.
the moil comes
Like
with what
Seinfeld.
meat? What meat does he come with? A brisket. Um,
Oh, cool.
but
I wish if I was able to edit, I would edit it all.
terrible joke number one. We should have a counter. But but
Yeah.
he said, like, and he's been in the army for a few years. Like he's now 30. He's done reserves and everything. And he says, I hope the only planes you hear are planes in your dreams and all these things. And it's sort of like it's not a scary existence, but it's sort of like a sad existence because we all, and I'm sure on the other side it's like this also, for not for everyone, but for most people. Like at the end of the day, like I don't want to have to wake up and watch my back so someone doesn't have an opportunity to stab me. Like it's a scary existence. It's
Yeah.
as much as Americans like, and that's something that you learn more and more as you get here and you live here more. And like some people have different opinions, but for me, where it's like October 7th, we were in the middle of Tel Aviv and there were rockets, and luckily we didn't live in the south, but we felt isolated. Like we locked the door, we bolted the door. We heard that there were terrorists all over Israel. No one had the right answers or any answers. The police weren't answering. The ambulances were all over the place. Like we heard that people from Nova were coming to Tel Aviv, and we heard that a whole kibbutz or multiple kibbutzim, kibbutzes were taken over. Like it's crazy, and and
Yeah.
and just the experience of like October 7th and being here from the eyes of someone who only heard stories of 1967, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, the Independence War, but really seeing it and feeling it and having your friends be in Gaza and fighting, it gives me, even thinking about it gives me chills. I think one story I'll tell you that I told you before is to really give you insight to like the way you feel after so many years in Israel. Is I was playing basketball in Rehovot, and there's like this group, bunch of Israelis, like, and I go by Charles, which is always weird to people because they're like,
Sorry, dude. Start the story again. I'm sorry.
"What happened?"
I got a call, which means that it cut off the recording. So you're playing basketball.
So I was playing basketball in Rehovot, and this whole group knows me as the American in the group because I'm the only one named Charles, and they're like, "Aren't you from England?" And I'm like, "No." Um, and then all of a sudden, this like kid in the army, like 20, 21 years old, and we get to talking. He's like, "Oh, how did your parents feel about October 7th?" And I'm like, "Listen, they didn't really feel so crazy about it. They knew that like Israel will be fine at the end of the day. Like most of the stories that happen in Israel is that, you know." it's two-sided. And I explained to him that it's like the way we're taught and the way we hear about Israel is that Israel always wins because we don't have a choice. But
Yeah.
it's still scary. So I continue to tell him, oh, I made Aliyah, I did all these things, and he's like, wow, like very cool. Like I'm very like impressed. He's like, I don't usually tell people this, but I was down south, and my twin sister was at the Nova Festival, and I said, oh my God, is she okay? And he looked at me with like these eyes that like, you know, people that have seen things like, you know, people have this look, and he looked at me, and I'm like, oh my God. He's like, she didn't make it home.
Oh
and
shit.
and that was in my life. I've never I didn't break down there, but never in my life did I like break down over. He was a stranger, a
Yeah.
perfect stranger, and never in my life did I break down. I sent you a voice note. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like for this person, this stranger, who I feel oddly so close to, where he had the ability to tell me like my sister, and the army moved. He's still in the army now. The army moved him to a base in Nasiona, which is right next to Rehovot, another city in Israel,
Which is away from the war.
which is 75, 100 miles away from Gaza, where he was originally stationed.
Hmm.
And he said my sister didn't make it home, and she was at the Nova Festival, and she was dancing. The Nova Festival, it was a festival for peace between all nations, not just Israelis and Palestinians. And unfortunately, she was murdered there, and they buried her a few days after when they found the body. And
Right.
like the reason I say this is that more and more do I get these quote unquote Israeli stories. Like we hear these stories of like, oh, when I met this person in the train station, as we grow up, and I'm sure Ephraim, you have a bunch of these stories as well. Oh, I met this person, and my shidduch came out of meeting this person at the train station. But we also have on the other side
You know
these
what?
we always hear these stories coming out of Israel, where it's like
Yeah.
one Shabbat I was sitting in the train, I was sitting here, and someone came up to me, and then his cousin came was my future spouse. We always hear
Yeah.
like these
Yeah.
good stories that happen, but it's when you live here and like you're a part of the history of Israel in whatever sense. I in no way think I'm going to be famous or anything of the sort, but it's sort of a very
Yeah, but
interesting
you're living through history. You're
right
living through,
these
these historical
moments.
wars, these historical moments. Yeah. So it's about you being a part of it, like you living it, breathing it.
It's what I had a conversation with my rabbi back in America over the phone, and I said it's so funny because these are no longer stories. Like this is a reality for us here in Israel.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
again, like I keep on saying, the '67 war, the Independence War, the Yom Kippur War, those are all stories. It doesn't really like it's like stories to us as Americans. The Revolutionary War, like it happened, but it's a story.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this is a reality, which is sort of like a bone chilling way, both in like a prideful way that like I'm here, I'm representing. I made Aliyah during the war, even after living here so many years, but it's a very interesting time to be an Israeli.
Yeah. It is. So I'm wondering, what you think of this. I believe that this is true. Um, that the closeness and the closeness that everyone and the brotherhood that everyone feels with each other in Israel is accentuated way more during these times. And I think it's like that with everyone and every nation. Like Americans were never more American than during 9/11,
Correct.
or right after 9/11. And Israelis were, leading up to October 7th, Israelis are not all brothers and sisters.
No,
I
they were
mean,
very divided.
I remember, yeah, I mean, you would tell me all the time that, you're trying to make your way to work and there's protests in the street, and you're trying to make your way, to here, and you can't get there because there's, this road's blocked down, and these protests are here and
For
these are
sure.
here. And the politics are so complicated that it was impossible. I don't even try to follow them. Um, I think America's already exhausting. American politics is already exhausting enough, exhausting enough for me to be even,
Trump
remotely
2024.
part. No, man, I don't know. I
RFK.
mean, I love him, but after Trump got shot, I don't think he has. I don't think RFK is a shot anymore.
No, he just
Um,
if I'm not mistaken, I think RFK just backed Trump. I think yesterday or something.
no, he didn't.
I could be very wrong. I thought I saw something.
What? No, I would have seen that. I
I
think
don't know.
he, I think he commended him for moving
Jamie,
on and
check
giving
it.
credit.
Jamie.
But yeah. So I think that we feel this level of brotherhood because of how frequent tragedies are and how frequent terrorist attacks are. I
Yeah,
mean, I've never experienced one, but in the dozen times I've been to Israel in my life, I think every single time without fail, there has been a terror threat or a bomb threat in a community, in where any
100%.
given place that I'm going,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, um, even though nothing happened, when everyone around, if I look around me and I see someone that doesn't see what's going on, hey, are you okay? Just like, hey, just make sure that you don't go there. Make, something's going on over there. Like you reach out, you care, you take care of people. Um, and and you don't necessarily do that in a place where you don't ever feel any kind of existential threat,
Right.
and America. I've heard this before. I forgot where I heard it, but maybe on a Lex Friedman podcast with one of his guests. But they were talking about what makes America unique is how isolated they are from the rest of
Hmm.
the world, and like how until recently, when in cyber attacks or like the form of the evolution of technology allows the evolution of warfare to manifest in a very different way. Um, America wasn't like it wasn't really it was too isolated to be caught by surprise or under attack by surprise.
Right.
Um, and in Israel, which is literally a speck surrounded by
22
you know
Arab nations.
22 Arab nations, and most of many of whom do not would love nothing more than for Israel not to
For
exist.
sure.
Like you don't get security, and when you don't get security, you don't get lazy, and you don't take and then you don't take things for granted. And I think that taking things for granted is a sign of comfort. And comfort is not
Hmm.
necessarily a good thing, you know. And I think Israel never got a chance, and the Jewish people historically never got a chance to be comfortable. When do you ever get comfortable? Every time we get comfortable somewhere, we get kicked out.
For
You go to
sure.
Spain, you go to Yemen, you go to Germany, you go to Poland, you go to Egypt, you go to anywhere on the map. And my grandfather would always tell me, he goes, anywhere you go, anywhere I'd go on vacation, I'd always find a Jewish cemetery,
Oh,
or
yeah.
like
Oh, yeah, Saba.
a site where all the no, this is Zaidi,
Oh, it's
right?
Zaidi.
A site, yeah, just a site, a site. This is where X, Y, and Z amount of Jews were
Murdered,
pogromed,
yeah.
massacred, slaughtered. And it never, and he goes, and I didn't even know about these places. I'm going on a vacation with my wife to, Japan, to Africa, I have no idea, all these places. I never even
Right.
knew there was Jewish history, and you find out not only is there history, but guess what? We were killed there. But this is a little bit, this is all a little bit not come together ish, although it is, I guess, in a certain way.
I think differently. I think it is because you're sharing, like me telling these stories is sharing an experience of coming together.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
that's true.
it does come at the hands of pogroms and terrorist attacks and everything like that. But again, like
Yeah.
we all, I do
Yeah,
believe,
what's the result? What's the consequence? The consequence is brotherhood.
yeah, the consequence is brotherhood. The consequence is coming together. Like again, unfortunately, it comes from tragedy, and I think that that's the unfortunate. Again, going all the way back to how we sort of started the conversation, the human condition. Unfortunately, the human condition is tragedy brings people together.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
the unfortunate reality. Like during the Holocaust, like people had to do these crazy things in order to survive, but it did create this sort of oneness of, okay, now we need somewhere to be. We need someone to protect us. And every year on Holocaust Memorial Day, I think the head commander of the army says at Auschwitz, he said, if the IDF existed, we would have saved 6 million Jews. He makes a
Yeah,
very bold statement. It doesn't matter if he's
that is a bold statement.
it's a very bold statement, but it's sort of true, and you're seeing it sort of now in the Paris Olympics, right? The Paris Olympics, the Israeli athletes are getting death threats saying here, they're getting texts saying, "Welcome to your funeral will be X, Y, and Z." Let's just say someone named Daniel Cohen, just to throw out a very generic Jewish name. Oh, hi Daniel Cohen. Funeral of Daniel Cohen will be at this location, yada 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 yada. And the Israelis are getting text and these things. But I think it's a unifying factor. So the coming together is that it's the realization that we all want to live lives and be treated the same. And
Hmm.
it's this coming togetherness of Israel that I think should be really, what's the term for it is a good question. I think this coming together should be, you know, risen up. It should be given stature in a sense where it's like, this is, unfortunately, this is the way all nations should be. You should come together and be this brotherhood trying to help each other. I always give the example of when Americans ask me like, oh, what's Israel like? I'm like, well, if you fall in America, people are just going to stare, and it's the bystander effect. But in Israel, you fall on the street, someone's going to invite you to a Shabbat meal.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a very interesting
But yeah,
difference.
but do you think, I don't know. I'm not asking you to challenge. I mean, I'm really curious. Do you think it's of do you think that if Israel was isolated like America was to that extent, right, where we're in our own little bubble and we're by ourselves, we're in our own culture and our own little world, and we have our own problems and our own things, and we're not really under threat at any given moment from anyone at any point, as far as we can tell. You know, do you think that we would have evolved the same way, that the national identity and the national culture would have evolved the same way?
It's a very good and interesting question. I think,
Like, I think that there's a reason why. I think that there is an intentional reason why Israel is the Jewish land, and part of the reason I think it is due to the fact that Judaism does not believes in the value of emergence from hard work and from struggle, and that through challenges, like it's anti comfort, it's anti settling for good enough,
right.
and by placing a promised land in a tiny strip of desert land where you have to advance technology to just get water. You have to be able to purify the salt water that because none of the water around you is even close to consumable, and you have to develop this and that kind of technology to create farms and to create to support yourself
Right.
agriculturally, and you're surrounded by people. None of this is easy, like they're not, no, like, we're given something very difficult, but and a very difficult plot of land in a very difficult geographical location. But I think that the only reason why we achieve what we achieve as Jews, as Israelis, as whatever, is because it's out of necessity and challenges and hardship. And if we were comfortable, I don't know that we would necessarily even do the same thing.
I think I'll challenge the question is I if everything was considered equal, let's play the game that like the Holocaust still happened and pogroms and everything. However, Israel was in Madagascar, right?
Okay.
Like if that's the thing, I think it's a cultural slash religion question. I don't think it's a who's your neighbor question, because it's funny because I think Jordan
Well, it's not
Peterson.
just it's not just who your neighbor is. I'm sorry,
No,
you
go ahead.
continue your point in a second, but it's not just who your neighbor is, but the land itself.
For
I was
sure.
talking to Ari, and I think before the Israelis moved in '67, or since we won the war,
Which war?
um, the Independence War,
48.
48. Sorry, the 48 war. I don't think that anyone thought that Israel could sustain more than like a million or a million and a half people. Like just with what the land was able to provide. That it was considered a poor, broke land. That the land itself, like forget about the neighbors for a second. Like we could go back to it, but the land itself
Mm-hmm.
is not able to supply for more than a million people, a million and a half people. How many people live in Israel today? 8
10,
million,
10
10
million.
million, 10 million. And how do you get from economists assuming that, or concluding that not more than a million and a half people could live in this entire little speck of smaller than New Jersey, of desert land,
Right.
and all of a sudden you manage to fit 10 million people in it. It's because of hardship. It's because of necessity. It's because you have to push yourself to get to there.
But I don't think it's a different question from the founding fathers in America. Like America, yes, had more potential. It had wood. It had all these things. It had climate. It had farmland. It had everything. But you had to build it. What's the term? If you build it, they'll come. Like there was a level of infrastructure. You made an interesting point by saying, oh, when the Israelis came and won the war, the Israelis were always here. The Jews were always here. We were always in Israel. If you go back even to King David and you go back to all these things, like we were building the land even then. And yes, it's
Yeah, but
come
there were times of more where it was more or less populated by
for
Jews.
sure.
Correct. That people like I forgot who it was. I think there was maybe the Rambam or the Ramban, Nachmanides or Maimonides went to Israel, and like it was his dream his entire life. He grew up in either Spain. It was either
In
Spain or
Egypt.
Egypt,
Yeah.
depending on who it was. And they went to Israel, and they cried when they got there. And they're like, "This is not the land that we thought it was. Like, no one's here. Like, everything's falling apart. Everything's decrepit. It doesn't look like it's sustainable. It doesn't look like it supports life." And they left. They didn't
Right.
even get to stay. So I mean, yeah, we've been there. People have, Jews have lived there forever, but
Yeah.
um,
But that's where the question comes
but
of
it hasn't.
necessity.
Yeah,
Like that's what I was
yeah,
saying. Like is there other than that, like, even today, like I still do believe like the place for Jews to go is Israel. Like do I love America? Am I a blue-blooded American? 1050%, 100%. I love America, and there are many times where I'm like, I would love to go back and live there for a few years. However, as a religious Jew who wears a kippah, and this is something I say to non-religious people in Israel when they ask me why do you move to Israel, of course it's a necessity, and even if it was in Madagascar or the Sahara Desert, it's a privilege to be able to wear a kippah and wear tzitzit and do all these things in Israel. It is a privilege. Even if you have the non-religious people saying, "Oh, but we want buses and trains and everything on Shabbat." Like I think the question is a very interesting one. It's a very interesting premise as well. But that's the one thing where it's like in America where I was afraid to walk out, at least in my town in New York and whatever. There are still a bunch of Jews. Like I myself experienced anti-Semitism. I remember a few stories when I was 10, 11, 12 years old playing basketball outside, wearing a kippah and having people yell, Shabbat Shalom, you motherfucking Jew, and in their car and driving away. And here,
right.
like it's like there's so much respect, even when someone who is not religious comes over to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm eating on Tisha B'av, which is coming up in 2 weeks, and like, it happens. You
It's
want
a
me to
fast
leave?"
day, right? It's a national fast day where everyone fasts
Right.
25 hours.
Right. And these things are just so ingrained, and it's a question again, like I'll go back to the original question, which is it necessity? Is it all these things? Of course it is. If you want to base it on the history and everything that happened, the Holocaust, and not having a homeland and being literally quote unquote homeless, and I don't think literally and quote unquote can go in the same sentence, but we're gonna go with it. But
Right.
um but like those are the things, and like that's what makes me like I've struggled with Judaism like most people do. I've struggled with understanding and going to synagogue and all these things, but that's something that like I'm super
Well, you've
prideful about.
struggled. You've struggled with systematic and organized and guilt related,
For sure.
or guilt. But that's not what Judaism is.
No, but
Not at
that's
its
also not what
core.
I'm
I don't think.
arguing right here.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, with the problems that you have are the man-made problems, not the
Right.
philosophical or,
No,
as far as I know.
100%, you're 100% correct. But what I am saying here is on the lines of the pridefulness and the sheer joy to know that at 2 in the morning, if I go somewhere, there's something kosher for me to eat. If I walk out in the street with a kippah, no one's gonna bat an eye. If I walk outside wearing a white shirt on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, it's a normal thing. It's just all of these things where it's like, yes, I might not be in my mind the most connected Jew, even though yes, I am religious and I put on tefillin every morning and I wear tzitzit every day and I do all of these things. But it's just the privilege to do it and that's really the essence of what I'm trying to convey here. Where it's like it's a privilege to do these things, and I don't think it makes a difference if we're in the Sahara Desert or if we're in Israel.
So you don't think there's anything inherently special about the plot of land that you're on?
Other than the historical factor of ancestors and whatever, I think that inherently we would have the same problems, we would have the same issues. I think the same.
You think that if Israel moved tomorrow to South Africa, that you think all the problems that we have now would follow?
I think they would be different, but I think in essence they would be relatively the same.
Interesting.
I think there's
Interesting.
just this generic anti-Semitism, anti-Israelism, anti-Jew.
Anti-Judaism, yeah.
Yeah, I just think that if
Anti-Semitism.
we're not causing our own problems, which we do a lot of times in Israel with the left and the right and government and all these things, it's our neighbors. South Africa is as we all saw with the international court doesn't like Israel.
Yeah.
they're trying to hide their own problems of starving their people. They do electricity cutting where because they don't have enough money to pay for electricity. So people in South Africa go 2, 3, 4, 10 hours a day without electricity, no matter if you're rich or poor. They're trying to hide their own problems, and you know, going against Israel and claiming it's a genocide, go jump in a lake.
Wait, dude. Dude, I need you to say that last 5 seconds over again because I got another call.
All I said was that
Yeah.
saying Israel is doing a genocide, you can go jump in a lake.
Okay, that's a good conclusion. Dude, let's wrap up over here
You got it.
because my kid just woke up from his nap. But it was awesome. I
Yeah.
always love doing this.
Until next
We'll talk
time.
soon. I'm sorry I forgot your birthday again,
It's
and
all
I'll
good.
catch you. And we'll do this again real soon. All right,
Catch
dude.
you soon, dude. You got it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.